The late October wind bit through my jacket as I balanced the arrangement of crimson roses against my hip, one gloved hand steadying the crystal vase, while the other fumbled with the building's heavy brass door. My fingers ached beneath the leather, not from the cold, but from something I'd learned to hide behind careful layers of fabric and forced smiles. The Meridian Tower rose 40 stories above Chicago's Gold Coast, its glass facade reflecting clouds that promised snow. I'd been making this delivery every Wednesday for 3 months now. Always the same arrangement, always the same penthouse suite on the 40th floor. 36 roses. Never 35, never 37. In shades of burgundy so deep they appeared almost black in certain light. The client never left specific instructions beyond that number, but I'd learned to read the unspoken language of flowers well enough to understand what this particular arrangement meant. Power, passion, and something darker I couldn't quite name. The elevator's brass interior reflected my pale face back at me. 24 years old, but looking older today, exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath my gray eyes. I'd covered the worst of the bruising on my left cheekbone with concealer that morning, but the autumn light was unforgiving. My auburn hair, normally worn loose around my shoulders, was pulled back in a severe bun that made my features look sharper than they were. Professional, invisible. The floristry business I'd inherited from my grandmother 2 years ago was barely surviving. Pemberton's Petals occupied a cramped storefront in a neighborhood that straddled the line between revitalization and decay, and most days I worked alone, arranging bouquets for weddings I'd never attend and funerals for people I'd never meet. This weekly delivery to the Meridian was my most lucrative account. The client paid triple my normal rate and always left a cash tip in an envelope at the concierge desk. That money kept my lights on and my rent paid, even if it couldn't fix everything else that was broken in my life. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the 40th floor, and I stepped into the private vestibule that served only 2 penthouses. The left door bore a discreet brass number, 4001. I'd never seen inside, never met the resident who ordered these weekly roses. The arrangement was always left with building security, payment handled through a lawyer whose business card identified him only as J. Morrison, Esquire. I set the vase carefully on the marble console table beside the door, just as I had every Wednesday for the past 3 months. My ritual was precise. Arrange the roses so their blooms faced the door, ensure no stray leaves marred the presentation, adjust the card that bore only the Pemberton's Petals logo with no message. Then leave, collect my envelope from security, and disappear back into the gray Chicago afternoon. But today, as I turned to press the elevator call button, the penthouse door opened. He was taller than I'd imagined during the countless times I'd wondered about the mysterious client who ordered blood-red roses with mathematical precision. Perhaps 6'3", with the kind of build that came from disciplined athleticism rather than vanity. Broad shoulders beneath a crisp white dress shirt, the first 4 buttons casually undone to reveal defined collarbones and the suggestion of a powerful chest. His hair was dark, almost black, styled with the careless perfection that required expensive products and skilled hands. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch. Deep brown, almost black, with an intensity that felt like being pinned beneath a microscope. "You're early," he said, his voice carrying the faintest trace of an Italian accent, smooth as aged whiskey. "I was hoping to catch you this time." I clutched my empty hands together, suddenly aware of how the leather gloves concealed more than just cold fingers. "I apologize if I've disrupted your schedule, Mr. I paused, realizing I'd never actually learned his name. "Ravello," he supplied, leaning one shoulder against the doorframe with calculated casualness. "Dante Ravello. But please, just Dante." His gaze moved from my face to the roses, then back again. "You've been delivering these for months. I've seen you on the security cameras." Heat crept up my neck despite the vestibule's chill. The idea of being watched, even unknowingly, made my skin prickle with discomfort. "I hope the arrangements have been satisfactory," more than satisfactory. He straightened, and I noticed how his movement was fluid, controlled, like a dancer, or perhaps something more dangerous. The precision is remarkable. Exactly 36 roses, stems cut at precisely the same angle, arranged in a spiral pattern that creates natural depth. That's not standard floristry training. I blinked, surprised he'd noticed details most clients never registered. My grandmother taught me. She believed flowers deserved to be arranged with the same care a painter would give a canvas. Smart woman. Dante's gaze sharpened, focusing with unsettling precision on my face. You're hurt. My hand flew automatically to my cheekbone, where the concealer had apparently failed its purpose. It's nothing. I'm clumsy. Walked into a cabinet door. The lie tasted bitter, but it was a familiar bitterness. I'd been perfecting this particular fiction for 6 months, ever since Kyle's casual backhand had escalated into closed-fist punches that left marks requiring long sleeves and strategic makeup application. Dante didn't respond immediately, but something shifted in his expression. A hardening around his mouth, a coldness entering those dark eyes that made me take an involuntary step backward. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost gentle, which somehow made it more frightening. Cabinet doors don't leave fingerprint-shaped bruises, Iris. He tilted his head slightly, studying me with an attention that made me feel simultaneously exposed and strangely safe. That's your name, isn't it? The owner of Pemberton's Petals? How did you... I stopped, realizing the answer was obvious. Of course he knew my name. He'd been watching me on security cameras, had likely investigated me as thoroughly as any client might investigate a regular service provider. Yes, Iris Pemberton. Beautiful name for someone who works with flowers. He glanced down at my hands, still clasped together at my waist. May I see your hands, Iris? The request was polite, almost casual, but there was steel beneath the velvet. This wasn't a man accustomed to being refused. I should go, I said instead, pressing the elevator call button with more force than necessary. I have other deliveries. Please. The single word stopped me. Not because it was commanding, but because it held a note of genuine concern that I hadn't heard directed at me in longer than I could remember. Just let me see your hands. The elevator remained stubbornly silent, not arriving quickly enough to save me from this increasingly uncomfortable interaction. I found myself slowly peeling off the leather gloves, revealing hands that told their own story. Bruises ringing both wrists in distinct finger-shaped patterns, a healing cut across the back of my left hand where a thrown glass had found its target, raw knuckles from where I'd tried to defend myself during last night's argument. Dante's jaw tightened as he studied the evidence of violence I'd tried so carefully to conceal. He didn't reach for my hands, didn't touch me, but his gaze cataloged every mark with the attention of someone who understood exactly what they represented. Who? He asked simply. It's not... I began, then stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. Not what? Not his business? Not as bad as it looked? Not something I could escape from without risking worse? It's complicated. It's not complicated, Dante said, his voice deadly quiet. Someone is hurting you. That's never complicated. The elevator finally chimed, its doors sliding open with merciful timing. I stepped inside quickly, fumbling to pull my gloves back on with shaking hands. Thank you for the tip money, Mr. Ravello. I'll see you next Wednesday. Dante, he corrected, but he didn't try to stop me as the doors began to close. Instead, he simply said, And Iris? Cabinet doors don't hit back. But men who hurt women? His smile was cold enough to frost the glass between us. They usually learn consequences eventually. The elevator descended, and I sagged against the brass railing, my heart hammering against my ribs. The interaction had lasted perhaps 5 minutes. but it felt like I'd been stripped bare. Every careful secret I'd built around myself peeled away by a stranger's too observant eyes. By the time I reached the lobby and collected my envelope from the security desk, thicker than usual, I noticed, my hands had stopped shaking. The guard, a kind-faced man in his 50s named Marcus, who always had a smile for me, handed over the payment with his usual professionalism. "Mr. Ravello asked me to give you this as well," he said, producing a business card from his breast pocket. "Said you might need it." The card was heavy stock, expensive, with only a phone number embossed in simple black font. No name, no address, no indication of what that number connected to. I turned it over, but the reverse was blank. "Thank you, Marcus." I slipped the card into my jacket pocket alongside the envelope, then pushed through the building's heavy doors back into the October afternoon. The walk back to my shop took 20 minutes, long enough for the encounter in the penthouse vestibule to replay itself in my mind with increasing anxiety. What had possessed me to show him my hands? To stand there like some helpless victim while a stranger catalogued the evidence of my shame? I'd spent 6 months carefully constructing an illusion of normalcy, and in less than 5 minutes Dante Ravello had demolished it with nothing more than quiet observation and a polite request. The bell above Pemberton's petals chimed as I entered, and I was immediately wrapped in the familiar embrace of green scents and floral perfumes. Roses and lilies from this morning's delivery. Eucalyptus branches I'd been using in sympathy arrangements. The earthy smell of potting soil and stem water. This was my sanctuary, the only place where Kyle's presence didn't completely dominate my thoughts. I'd just begun stripping the thorns from a new shipment of roses when the bell chimed again. My stomach clenched instinctively. Kyle sometimes stopped by during my shifts, ostensibly to check on me, though we both knew it was more about maintaining control than concern. But it wasn't Kyle who entered. It was a woman in her early 60s, elegantly dressed in a camel coat, her silver hair styled in a sophisticated bob. She moved through the shop with the careful attention of someone who understood flowers, pausing to examine my displays with an expert eye. "May I help you?" I asked, setting down my shears and wiping my hands on my work apron. "These are beautiful," she said, gesturing to a cascading arrangement of white peonies and dusty miller I'd designed for a wedding tomorrow. "You have real talent. The structural integrity is impressive. These will photograph well." Professional praise from someone who clearly knew floristry made something warm unfold in my chest. "Thank you. Peonies are my favorite to work with. They have natural drama." "I can tell." She turned to face me fully, and I noticed she had the same assessing quality in her gaze that Dante Ravello had possessed, as though she was reading more than what I wanted to show. "I'm Maria Santos. I own the event planning company that's been trying to get on your books for the past month." Recognition clicked into place. Santos Events was one of the premier wedding and corporate event companies in Chicago, the kind of client that could transform a struggling flower shop into a thriving business. I'd received their inquiry email but hadn't responded yet. Between Kyle's demands on my time and my own exhaustion, I'd let it slip through the cracks. "I apologize for not responding," I said, mentally calculating how badly I'd potentially damaged this opportunity. "It's been a busy season." "I understand." Maria's smile was knowing. "Small business ownership is demanding. That's actually why I stopped by in person. I wanted to see your work firsthand before making a formal offer." She pulled a leather portfolio from her bag, setting it on my work counter and opening it to reveal photographs of elaborate event setups, ceremonies in historic ballrooms, corporate galas in modern loft spaces, intimate dinners in converted warehouses. Each image showcased stunning floral arrangements that must have cost thousands of dollars. "We have 12 major events booked between now and New Year's," Maria continued, her perfectly manicured finger tapping each photograph. "Weddings, corporate galas, a few private celebrations for clients who prefer discretion. I need a florist who can handle both beauty and volume, someone with artistic vision who can also execute under pressure." "That's a significant undertaking," I said carefully, my mind already racing through logistics. ordering flowers in bulk, hiring temporary help, managing the timing and transportation. I'd need to see the specific requirements. $50,000, Maria interrupted. That's the total contract value, 20% upfront, remainder on completion. And if things go well, we'd want you on permanent retainer for next year. The number hung in the air between us, so impossibly large that I was certain I'd misheard. $50,000 would save my shop, would let me rebuild my grandmother's legacy, would give me enough financial cushion to finally consider leaving Kyle without ending up homeless. My voice caught. That's incredibly generous, but I'd need time to review. Of course. Maria pulled a thick contract from her portfolio, setting it beside the photographs. Take a few days. I'll need an answer by Monday. After she left, I stood alone in my shop, staring at the contract without really seeing it. $50,000. Freedom, disguised as business opportunity. The timing was too perfect, too convenient, arriving on the same day that Dante Ravello had seen through my careful facades. The business card in my pocket felt suddenly heavy, its single phone number a question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. I didn't call the number on Dante's card. Instead, I spent the next 3 days buried in Maria Santos's contract, convincing myself that this windfall was simply good fortune, that the universe occasionally smiled on people who needed it most. Kyle noticed the shift in my demeanor, the way I hummed while arranging centerpieces, the extra care I took with my appearance despite the bruises still fading beneath concealer. "You seem happy," he said Thursday night, his tone making the observation sound like an accusation. We were in my tiny apartment above the shop, the space I'd tried to make into a home, despite his presence gradually consuming every corner. "What's got you so cheerful?" I kept my focus on the stir-fry I was making, spatula moving vegetables around the wok with practiced efficiency. "I received a contract offer, a big one. Enough work to carry the shop through the holidays." "Yeah?" He moved behind me, his body too close, his breath carrying the familiar scent of the bourbon he'd been drinking since arriving an hour ago. "How much?" My hand tightened on the spatula. Kyle had an instinct for finding vulnerabilities, for identifying anything that gave me independence or hope, then systematically destroying it. "It's complicated. The payment structure." "How much, Iris?" His hand closed around my wrist, applying just enough pressure to hurt without leaving marks in visible places. He'd become skilled at that over the months. $50,000, I whispered. "But it's over several months and there are expenses." The spatula clattered into the sink as he spun me around, his face inches from mine. In the early days, I'd mistaken his intensity for passion, his possessiveness for devotion. Now I recognized it for what it was. Control, wearing the mask of love. $50,000 and you weren't going to tell me. His fingers dug deeper into my wrist, and I felt the bruises I'd just managed to heal beginning to return. "We're supposed to be partners, Iris. But you keep secrets, make plans without me. Kyle, please." I tried to pull away, but his grip only tightened. "You think you're better than me?" His voice rose, the alcohol loosening whatever restraints he usually maintained in public. "You think because you arrange flowers and smile pretty for rich customers, you're something special? You're nothing without me. Nothing." The slap came so fast I barely registered it before pain exploded across my cheek. I stumbled against the counter, tasting copper where my teeth had cut the inside of my lip. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard him breathing hard. That particular rhythm that meant the violence was just beginning. "Look what you made me do," he said. And I'd heard this particular script so many times it had lost all meaning. "If you'd just told me the truth. If you'd just been honest." The second blow caught my shoulder as I tried to shield my face, sending me to the floor. I curled instinctively, making myself small, protecting my head and ribs the way I'd learned through trial and painful error. The assault lasted perhaps 2 minutes. Kyle's fists finding soft tissue, his boots connecting with my thigh when I tried to crawl away. But it felt infinite, each second stretching into eternity. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. I heard him pacing, heard the harsh sound of his breathing gradually calming. This was the pattern. Violence, followed by remorse, followed by promises that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow he would be the man I'd first met, charming and gentle. Tomorrow we'd start fresh. Iris, baby, I'm sorry. His voice was thick with manufactured emotion. You just push my buttons, make me crazy. But I love you. You know I love you, right? I didn't respond, just pressed my face against the cold linoleum and concentrated on breathing through the pain, radiating from what I suspected was a cracked rib. Iris? He crouched beside me, his hand, the same one that had just beaten me, reaching out to stroke my hair with sickening gentleness. Say something. Tell me you forgive me. I forgive you, I whispered, because the alternative was worse. Silence meant he'd escalate, would continue until I gave him the absolution he needed to live with himself. That's my girl. He helped me up with exaggerated care, supporting me to the bedroom as though he were a nurse, rather than the cause of my injuries. You rest. I'll clean up dinner. Tomorrow we'll talk about that contract, figure out how to invest the money properly. After he left, he never stayed the night after hitting me, some twisted sense of propriety keeping him from sleeping beside the evidence of his violence. I lay in the darkness, cataloging damage. The rib was definitely cracked, maybe broken. My lip was split, my left eye swelling. New bruises bloomed across old ones, creating a palette of pain in purple and yellow and sickly green. I thought about Maria Santos's contract, about the freedom $50,000 could buy. But I also knew Kyle would find a way to control that money, just as he controlled everything else in my life. The contract wasn't salvation. It was just a larger cage, furnished more comfortably. My phone, charging on the nightstand, glowed with the time. 11:47 p.m. Beside it, I'd placed Dante Ravello's business card, its single phone number a question I'd been avoiding for 3 days. Before I could talk myself out of it, I picked up the phone and dialed. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. Iris, not a question, a statement, as though he'd been expecting my call, had perhaps been waiting for it. How did you know it was me? I asked, my voice rough from crying and the split lip. I know many things. A pause, and when he spoke again, his tone had shifted, become harder. Where are you? Home. Above the shop. I touched my swollen eye carefully, wincing at the tenderness. I shouldn't have called. This was a mistake. Has he hurt you again? Dante's voice cut through my attempt at retreat. The man who gave you those bruises. Has he touched you tonight? The directness of the question, the lack of pretense or polite fiction, broke something in me. Yes. I'm sending a car. It will be there in 10 minutes. Not a request, not a suggestion, a decision already made. Pack a bag, essentials only. You're not going back. I can't just leave, I began, but he interrupted. You can. You will. His certainty was absolute, admitting no argument. 10 minutes, Iris. Be ready. The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at my phone, mind racing through 1,000 objections. I couldn't abandon my shop, my apartment, the life I'd built no matter how damaged it had become. Kyle would find me, would make me regret this attempted escape. I didn't know Dante Ravello, had no reason to trust a stranger who ordered blood-red roses with mathematical precision, but I also couldn't survive another night like tonight. Couldn't endure another cycle of violence and false remorse. And something in Dante's voice, that absolute certainty, that promise of protection, made me want to believe that escape was possible. I pulled a duffel bag from my closet and began packing with shaking hands. Clothes, toiletries, my grandmother's jewelry box with its collection of costume pieces that held more sentimental than monetary value, my laptop, my phone charger, the photograph of my parents taken before the car accident that had orphaned me at 16. 9 minutes after Dante's call, a black Mercedes pulled up outside my shop. The driver was a mountain of a man, perhaps 40, with the bearing of someone who'd seen military service. He introduced himself simply as Marco and helped me into the car with surprising gentleness, his eyes cataloging my injuries with professional detachment. "Mr. Ravello is waiting," he said, pulling smoothly into the late-night Chicago traffic. "Don't worry about your shop. We'll have someone watching it until we can arrange proper security." "I should call the police," I said, more to myself than to Marco. "File a report about Kyle. Mr. Ravello will handle it." Marco's tone suggested this particular conversation was closed. He's very good at handling things. The drive took 20 minutes, carrying us from my marginal neighborhood to the Gold Coast, where the Meridian Tower rose against the night sky. Marco used a private entrance, bypassing the main lobby to access an elevator that required a keycard. We rose swiftly, my ears popping as floors blurred past. The penthouse door, 4001, the same one I'd delivered roses to for 3 months, stood open. Marco gestured for me to enter, then disappeared with my bag before I could thank him. The interior was nothing like I'd imagined during my weekly deliveries. I'd pictured cold modernity, all chrome and glass, the kind of space that valued display over comfort. Instead, I found myself in a living area that felt almost warm. Deep leather furniture in chocolate brown, walls lined with built-in bookshelves, art that looked collected rather than purchased for investment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of Lake Michigan, its dark water reflecting city lights. Dante emerged from a hallway to my right, and I was struck again by his presence, the way he seemed to fill space without dominating it, his control so absolute it required no demonstration. He'd changed from the dress shirt I'd seen him in earlier, now wearing dark slacks and a black cashmere sweater that emphasized his build. His eyes went immediately to my face, and I watched his expression harden as he cataloged the fresh damage Kyle had inflicted. He moved closer, his hand lifting as though to touch my injured cheek, then stopping just short of contact. "May I?" he asked, his voice gentle. I nodded, and his fingers touched my face with surprising tenderness, tilting my head to examine the swelling around my eye, the split lip, the bruising along my jawline. "Your rib," he said, his gaze dropping to where I was unconsciously favoring my left side. "Broken or cracked?" "Cracked, I think." The clinical nature of the examination made it easier to discuss. "It's happened before. I know how to manage it." "It's happened before." He repeated my words slowly, as though tasting them, finding them bitter. "How long has this been going on, Iris?" 6 months. The admission came easier than I'd expected. He wasn't always like this. At first, he was... "Don't." Dante's voice remained soft, but steel ran beneath it. "Don't explain him to me. Don't justify what he's done. Men who hit women don't deserve explanations or understanding." He stepped back, gesturing toward the hallway he'd emerged from. "The guest suite is through there. Everything you need should be available, but if something's missing, Marco or Rosa can get it. Rosa is my housekeeper. She lives in the building, will come by tomorrow to introduce herself properly." "I can't stay here," I said, the words automatic even as exhaustion made my bones feel like lead. "Kyle will look for me. Will cause trouble. Let him look." Dante's smile was cold, predatory. I'd welcome the opportunity to meet this man who thinks violence makes him strong. The promise of retribution in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, I felt something dangerous unfurl in my chest. "Hope." "Who are you?" I asked quietly. Really? Because men don't offer sanctuary to strangers, don't promise protection without expecting something in return. Dante regarded me for a long moment, and I had the sense he was making some kind of decision, weighing how much truth to offer. I'm a businessman, he said finally. I own properties throughout Chicago, restaurants, hotels, commercial buildings. I also have connections to certain families who operate in less legitimate circles. He paused, watching my reaction. Does that frighten you? Should it? I countered. Most people would say yes. He moved to the windows, looking out at the city sprawled below us. But I've never hurt a woman, Iris. Never raised my hand to someone weaker, someone under my protection. The violence I've been part of, and I won't lie, there has been violence. It's been between men who chose that life, who understood the consequences. And Kyle? I asked. What will the consequences be for him? That depends. Dante turned back to face me. On whether he's smart enough to stay away from you. The threat was implicit, but clear. I should have been horrified by the casual way he discussed potential violence. Instead, I felt only a weary sort of relief that someone, finally, was willing to stand between me and the man who'd spent 6 months systematically destroying me. The contract, I said abruptly. Maria Santos, the event planner. Did you arrange that? His slight smile confirmed what I'd already suspected. Maria is a friend. When I told her about your work, showed her photographs of the arrangements you've been creating, she was genuinely interested. The offer is legitimate, Iris. You'll earn every dollar. But yes, I made the introduction. Why? The question encompassed everything. The roses, the protection, the contract, this penthouse sanctuary. Why do you care what happens to me? Dante crossed the space between us, stopping close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Because 3 months ago, I saw you deliver roses with hands that should have been creating beauty, not hiding bruises. Because every Wednesday, you walked into my building with your head down, your shoulders curled inward, like you were trying to make yourself invisible. His hand lifted, fingers barely brushing the uninjured side of my face. And I wondered what kind of man could look at someone as rare as you and decide the appropriate response was violence. You don't know me, I whispered. No, he agreed. But I know men like him. I've seen what they do, how they operate. They find someone with light and systematically extinguish it until the person they claim to love becomes a shadow. His thumb traced my cheekbone with exquisite gentleness. I won't let him finish what he started, Iris. You have my word. The promise hung between us, weighted with implications I was too tired to fully examine. I swayed slightly, exhaustion and pain catching up with me now that adrenaline was fading. Dante caught my elbow, steadying me. You need rest. Tomorrow we'll discuss details, security for your shop, how to handle the contract, what comes next. But tonight you sleep. He guided me to the guest suite, which turned out to be larger than my entire apartment. The bedroom featured a king-sized bed with linens that probably cost more than my monthly rent, an ensuite bathroom with a soaking tub, and a walk-in closet where someone had already hung my limited wardrobe alongside new items still bearing designer tags. Rosa anticipated your sizes, Dante explained, noting my expression. If anything doesn't fit, we'll exchange it. Don't argue. You'll need professional clothes for the contract work. After he left, I stood in the center of that impossibly luxurious room, trying to process the past 4 hours. I'd fled my apartment, accepted sanctuary from a man I barely knew, and stepped into a world so far removed from my reality, it felt like a dream. I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror as I prepared for bed. Face bruised and swollen, lips split, eye purpling in spectacular fashion. But beneath the damage, I saw something I hadn't glimpsed in months. a spark of defiance, of survival, of determination not to let Kyle win. My phone, still clutched in my hand, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sleep well, Piccola. You're safe now. D." I saved the number, then powered down the phone entirely. Tomorrow would bring complications, questions, difficult decisions about the future. But tonight, for the first time in 6 months, I slept without fear of footsteps in the hallway, without listening for the particular pattern of breath that preceded violence. Tonight, I was safe. Morning arrived with sunlight filtering through sheer curtains I didn't remember closing. For several disoriented seconds, I couldn't place where I was, the mattress beneath me too soft, the silence too complete, the absence of Kyle's presence too profound. Then memory returned in a rush. The beating, the phone call, Dante's penthouse sanctuary. I moved carefully, testing my injuries. The cracked rib protested with sharp insistence. My face felt puffy and tender, and various bruises announced themselves with each shift of position. But I was alive, unafraid, and for the first time in months, I'd slept through the night without jerking awake at every sound. The clock on the nightstand read 9:47 a.m. I never slept past 6, couldn't afford to when the shop required opening by 7. Panic fluttered in my chest until I remembered Marco's words about security arrangements. Someone was watching Pemberton's petals, ensuring Kyle couldn't destroy the only thing I had left. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Miss Pemberton?" A woman's voice, warm with a slight Spanish accent. "I'm Rosa. May I come in?" "Yes," I called, hastily running fingers through my tangled hair and wishing I looked less like someone who'd gone several rounds with a heavyweight boxer. Rosa was perhaps 55, compact and efficient, with kind eyes and hands that moved with practiced grace. She carried a breakfast tray laden with items that made my mouth water: fresh fruit, yogurt, toast with various spreads, and coffee that smelled like heaven. "Mr. Ravello thought you might prefer eating here this morning," she said, setting the tray on a small table near the window. "But he'd like to speak with you when you're ready. No rush. He's working from home today." "Thank you." I moved to the table, trying not to wince too obviously. "Rosa, about the clothes in the closet?" "They're yours," she said firmly. "Mr. Ravello was very specific about quality and fit. He has an excellent eye for such things." The idea of Dante Ravello selecting women's clothing for me should have felt invasive. Instead, it suggested an attention to detail that was oddly comforting, as though he'd truly seen me, rather than merely glanced in my direction. After Rosa left, I ate slowly, savoring food I hadn't cooked myself, coffee I hadn't made with trembling hands while calculating whether Kyle's mood would permit me to drink it in peace. The simple act of breakfast without fear felt revolutionary. I showered carefully, mindful of my injuries, then examined the closet's offerings. Rosa or Dante had provided everything: casual clothes in soft fabrics that wouldn't irritate bruised skin, professional outfits suitable for client meetings, even undergarments in precisely my size. I selected dark jeans and a cream cashmere sweater, items that felt impossibly luxurious against my skin. The bathroom vanity held high-end cosmetics, including concealer in the exact shade that might cover my bruising. I applied it carefully, though the swelling around my eye and the split lip were impossible to completely hide. The woman in the mirror looked fragile, haunted, but also, somewhere beneath the damage, determined. I found Dante in what appeared to be his home office, a space that combined professional necessity with personal comfort. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered the same stunning lake view as the living area. But here, the focus was the massive desk dominating the room, its surface scattered with papers and multiple computer monitors displaying what looked like financial reports. He glanced up as I entered, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but a softening around his eyes. You slept well. Better than I have in months. I remained in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. This man had offered sanctuary, but I still didn't fully understand why or what he expected in return. Thank you. For everything. The room, the clothes, the breakfast. Rosa's breakfast, he corrected, rising from his chair with fluid grace. I can barely manage coffee. Please sit. He gestured to a leather sofa near the windows, then joined me there rather than maintaining the formal distance of his desk. Up close, in morning light, I could see details I'd missed during our previous encounters. The faint scar along his left eyebrow, the slight crook in his nose that suggested it had been broken at least once, the way his hands, large, capable, rested on his knees with complete stillness. These were not soft hands, not the pampered hands of someone who'd inherited wealth without understanding its cost. I need to explain something, Dante said, his gaze direct and unflinching. About who I am, what I do, and why I've inserted myself into your life. You're connected to organized crime, I said quietly. You said so last night. Connected isn't quite accurate. He leaned back against the sofa, one arm extended along its back, his posture relaxed, but his attention completely focused on me. My grandfather came to Chicago from Sicily in 1952. He worked construction, saved his money, eventually bought a small restaurant. Over time, he acquired more properties, built relationships with the right people, and carved out territory in a city that was already divided among established families. I listened, understanding dawning. The Ravello name wasn't just connected to organized crime. It was part of its fabric. My father expanded what my grandfather built. Dante continued. He was smarter, more strategic, understood that the future belonged to legitimate businesses with carefully concealed roots. By the time I inherited control 8 years ago, the Ravello family owned hotels, restaurants, real estate throughout Chicago and beyond. Some of our income streams are completely legal. Others, he paused. Others exist in gray areas that most people prefer not to examine too closely. Like what? I asked, needing to understand exactly what I'd stepped into. Protection services for businesses that prefer not to rely on traditional security. Loans for people and companies that banks won't touch. Access to goods and services that require alternative supply chains. His expression remained neutral, but I sensed he was watching my reaction carefully. And yes, when disputes arise with rival families or when someone poses a threat to our interests, we handle it in ways that wouldn't pass legal scrutiny. Violence, I said flatly. You handle it with violence. Sometimes. He didn't flinch from the assessment. But never against the innocent. Never against women or children. Never against people who aren't involved in this life by choice. His hand moved, not quite touching my bruised face, but hovering close enough that I felt the warmth of his palm. What your Kyle did to you. That's not strength, Iris. That's cowardice wearing the mask of masculinity. He's not my Kyle, I said automatically. No, Dante agreed. He's not. Not anymore. The finality in his voice sent a chill down my spine. What did you do? Sent a message. Dante's smile was cold, predatory. Marco and 2 of my men paid Kyle a visit around 3 a.m., explained that you were under my protection now, that any attempt to contact you, to approach your shop, to even think about you too loudly would be considered a declaration of war against the Ravello family. He paused. They were very persuasive. I should have been horrified, should have protested this intervention, this assumption of control over my life. But all I felt was a savage satisfaction that Kyle had finally tasted fear, had finally understood what it felt like to be vulnerable and powerless. Did they hurt him? I asked. Nothing permanent. A few bruises, a cracked rib. Ironic symmetry, I thought. Dante's expression remained impassive. Kyle is a bully, Iris. Bullies fold when confronted with actual consequences. He won't bother you again. And if he does, then the consequences become more severe. The casual way he delivered the threat made it clear this wasn't bravado. But I don't think it will come to that. Cowards rarely have the courage to challenge real power. Silence settled between us, heavy with implications. I'd accepted sanctuary from a man whose business included violence, whose protection came with strings I couldn't yet see. The smart choice would be to thank him politely, return to my shop, resume my life with whatever safety his warning to Kyle had purchased. But I didn't want to be smart. I wanted to be free. The contract with Maria Santos, I said, changing subjects. Is it really legitimate? Completely. Dante pulled his phone from his pocket, tapping the screen a few times before handing it to me. Here are the event details she'll need you for. High-end weddings, corporate galas, a few private celebrations. Your work is exceptional, Iris. You didn't get this opportunity because I asked Maria to create it. You got it because she genuinely wants your floristry. I scrolled through the information, my practiced eye already envisioning arrangements. Cascading orchids for the Drake Hotel wedding, dramatic blood-red roses for the corporate gala. My chest tightened at that detail, and elegant white lilies for what appeared to be a funeral for someone very important. The timeline is aggressive, I observed. First event is in 10 days. I'd need help, additional supplies, transportation logistics. You'll have whatever you need. Dante reclaimed his phone, our fingers brushing briefly. Marco will handle security and transportation. Rosa knows people who do excellent temporary staffing if you need extra hands. And... He hesitated, an unusual crack in his confidence. I'd like to invest in your shop, make it a proper business rather than a struggle. Why? The question I'd asked last night, still unanswered in any way that made sense. Dante stood, moving to the windows, his silhouette dark against the morning light. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, more vulnerable than I'd heard it. My mother loved flowers, roses specifically. She said they were proof that beauty and danger could coexist in the same form. He touched the glass lightly. She died when I was 17, murdered by a rival family who wanted to send my father a message. They left her body surrounded by roses, their twisted idea of poetry. My throat tightened with unexpected sympathy. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. But the tension in his shoulders suggested otherwise. After she died, I couldn't look at roses for years. The sight of them brought back the image of her, lying there, surrounded by red blooms. It wasn't until I saw your arrangements, the precision, the artistry, the clear love you put into each one, that I could separate the flower from the memory. He turned back to face me. You reminded me that roses can be beautiful again, that not everything associated with pain has to remain painful forever. The confession hung between us, raw and honest. I understood then that this wasn't about charity or control or even attraction. It was about connection. Two people who'd been damaged by violence finding unexpected recognition in each other. I don't know how to do this, I admitted. How to accept help without feeling like I'm trading one cage for another. Dante crossed back to where I sat, then did something unexpected. He knelt, bringing himself to eye level rather than looming above me. This isn't a cage, Iris. You're free to leave any time. Your shop is yours. I won't touch the business unless you ask me to. The contract with Maria is legitimate employment. In this apartment. He gestured around us. Consider it a temporary safe house until you feel secure enough to resume your normal life. And us? I asked, the question slipping out before I could censor it. What are we in this arrangement? His hand lifted, fingers carefully avoiding my bruises as they traced the uninjured side of my face. What would you like us to be? The touch was so gentle, so different from Kyle's brutal claiming. that I found myself leaning into it despite every self-preservation instinct screaming at me to maintain distance. "I don't know," I whispered. "I'm not even divorced yet. Not that there was anything legal to dissolve. We were never married, just tangled up in each other until I couldn't tell where he ended and I began." "Then we start with friendship," Dante said simply. "You heal, you build your business, you rediscover who you are without fear shaping every decision." His thumb brushed my cheekbone. "And if something more develops, if you want something more, we'll address it then. No pressure, no expectations, just possibility." The offer was so reasonable, so unexpectedly kind from a man whose reputation was built on calculated ruthlessness, that I felt tears gathering. I blinked them back, refusing to cry in front of him. "Okay," I agreed. "Friendship, with possibility." Dante smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually guarded features into something almost boyish. "Good. Now let's discuss the contract logistics. You'll need a workspace larger than your current shop. Proper storage for the volume of flowers Maria's events require." We spent the next 2 hours planning, Dante's sharp business mind complementing my creative instincts. He asked intelligent questions about flower varieties, preservation techniques, transportation requirements. I found myself relaxing, the conversation flowing with surprising ease. By the time Rosa appeared with lunch, I'd filled 3 pages with notes and Dante had made several phone calls arranging resources I'd never have been able to access on my own. The intimidating Mafia boss had become simply Dante. Brilliant, focused, occasionally funny in a dry way that caught me off guard. "You should rest this afternoon," he said, as we finished eating. "Your injuries need time to heal properly. Tomorrow, if you're feeling up to it, we'll visit your shop, assess what needs to be done." "I can work today," I protested. "The contract deadlines will still exist tomorrow." His tone brooked no argument. "You've been running on adrenaline and desperation for months, Iris. Take one day to simply breathe." He was right, though admitting it felt like weakness. "What will you do?" "I have meetings this afternoon. Business that can't be postponed." He stood, then paused. "But I'll be home by 7. Perhaps we could have dinner together. Rosa makes excellent pasta, and I'd enjoy the company." The invitation was casual, friendly, exactly what he'd promised. Yet something in the way he looked at me, an intensity beneath the courtesy, suggested that friendship might struggle to contain what was building between us. "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. The following week passed in a blur of controlled chaos that gradually began to feel almost normal. Dante had kept his word about the security. My shop was watched discreetly by men who looked like ordinary customers, but moved with the same calculated efficiency as Marco. Kyle had made no attempt to contact me, his sudden disappearance from my life so complete it felt surreal. I spent my days at Pemberton's Petals, planning arrangements for Maria's contract, while simultaneously managing my regular clientele. The workspace that had felt adequate before now seemed impossibly cramped, every surface covered with sketches and flower samples. Dante had offered to rent me a larger space, but I'd declined, wanting to prove I could manage this opportunity on my own terms. My evenings were spent in penthouse 4001, sharing meals with Dante, and gradually learning the rhythms of his life. I discovered he read voraciously, history and philosophy mostly, the kind of dense text that suggested a mind constantly searching for patterns and meaning. He worked long hours but never brought visible stress home, maintaining careful separation between his legitimate businesses and whatever darker operations occupied his attention. We'd fallen into an easy companionship, our conversations ranging from the banal, favorite foods, childhood memories, books we'd loved, to the profound. He never pushed for more than I offered, never made me feel obligated beyond my own curiosity. The possibility he'd mentioned hung between us, acknowledged but unexplored. Until Wednesday evening, exactly 1 week after I'd called his number. I was arranging the weekly roses for his penthouse. 36 blood-red blooms, the standing order he'd never canceled despite my continued presence in his home. My hands moved with practiced efficiency, creating the spiral pattern he'd once observed so precisely when I felt him watching from the doorway. "You still have bruises," he observed quietly. "Though they're fading." I glanced down at my wrists, where the fingerprint-shaped marks had mellowed from purple to greenish yellow. In another week, they'd be gone completely. Physical evidence of Kyle's violence erased even if the psychological scars remained. "They heal," I said simply, tucking the final rose into place. "Everything heals eventually." Dante moved closer, his presence filling the space the way it always did. Substantial but not oppressive, powerful but contained. He wore the same casual elegance I'd grown accustomed to. Dark slacks, white dress shirt with the first 4 buttons undone, revealing the strong column of his throat, sleeves rolled to expose forearms corded with muscle. "I need to tell you something," he said, his tone serious enough that I set down my shears and gave him my full attention. "About why I really approached you. About why I've been ordering these roses for 3 months. My stomach tightened with apprehension. I'd suspected there was more to his interest than aesthetic appreciation, but hearing him confirm it felt like standing at the edge of a precipice. "I noticed you the first day you made a delivery," Dante continued. "You were careful, precise, treated each flower like it mattered. But it was the second week that changed things. You were wearing a short-sleeved shirt. Unusual for you, I learned later, and I saw the bruises on your arms. Defensive marks, the kind people get when they try to shield themselves." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I've seen enough violence to recognize its aftermath, Iris. And I knew, immediately, that someone was hurting you." "So, you ordered roses every week just to see if I'd show up?" I asked, uncertain whether to be flattered or disturbed. "Not just that." He moved to the window, his silhouette dark against the evening sky. "I had you investigated. Learned about your grandmother, about how you'd inherited the shop, about your struggles to keep it running. I learned about Kyle, his temper, his drinking, the noise complaints from your neighbors that never resulted in police intervention because he was charming enough to talk his way out of trouble. The invasion of privacy should have angered me. Instead, I felt oddly validated. Someone had seen my struggle, had cared enough to look beyond the careful facade I'd constructed. "I wanted to intervene sooner," Dante continued, "but I know men like Kyle. If I'd approached you directly, if I'd offered help without you asking for it, he would have escalated. Abusers don't respond well to perceived threats to their control. So I waited, arranged circumstances that might give you options, and hoped you'd eventually reach out." "The contract with Maria," I said, understanding crystallizing. "You weren't just making an introduction. You were creating an escape route." "Yes." He turned back to face me. $50,000 is enough to leave, to start over, to build independence. I thought if you had financial security, you might find the courage to walk away from him." "And when I didn't leave immediately?" I challenged. "When I stayed with Kyle even after signing the contract?" "Then I knew he had you convinced you deserved the abuse, or that you couldn't survive without him, or whatever lies abusers tell to maintain control." Dante's voice hardened. "And I waited for him to make a mistake big enough that you'd finally accept help." The calculated patience in his approach was both impressive and slightly terrifying. "You orchestrated my rescue." "I created conditions that made rescue possible," he corrected. "But you made the choice, Iris. You called me. You packed your bag. You walked away. I just made sure you had somewhere safe to walk to." Silence settled between us, heavy with revelations. I should have felt manipulated, angry at his covert interference in my life. But all I felt was gratitude mixed with something more complicated. an attraction I'd been trying to ignore, growing stronger with each shared meal, each easy conversation, each moment of unexpected vulnerability. "What do you want from me?" I asked, the question encompassing everything we'd been dancing around for the past week. Dante crossed the room slowly, stopping close enough that I could smell his cologne, cedar and bergamot, expensive and subtle. "I want you to heal. I want you to build your business into something spectacular. I want you to remember who you were before Kyle spent 6 months trying to destroy you. And then," my voice was barely above a whisper, "and then, if you're willing—" His hand lifted, fingers carefully avoiding any remaining bruises as they traced the line of my jaw. "I want the possibility we discussed. I want to see if what's building between us could become something real." "You barely know me," I protested, even as I leaned into his touch. "I know you're brilliant with flowers, that you inherited your grandmother's gift for seeing beauty in unexpected combinations. I know you're stronger than you believe, that you survived 6 months of systematic abuse and still managed to run a business and maintain your dignity. I know you hum while you work, that you take your coffee with too much cream, that you read mystery novels as escapism and cry during sad movies, even though you try to hide it. The litany of observed details should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like being truly seen for the first time in years." "I know Kyle tried to make you small," Dante continued, his thumb brushing my lower lip with exquisite gentleness. "And I want to give you space to be enormous." The kiss, when it came, was nothing like Kyle's brutal claiming. Dante's lips touched mine with a reverence that made my chest ache, his hands cradling my face as though I were something precious and fragile. He tasted of the espresso he'd been drinking, of promises and possibility, of everything I'd been afraid to want. When we finally separated, both breathing harder, his forehead rested against mine. "Too soon?" he asked, his voice rough. "Probably," I admitted. "I'm not even a month out of the worst relationship of my life. I shouldn't be thinking about starting something new. Then we'll slow down." He stepped back, though I could see the effort it cost him. "Take whatever time you need. The possibility isn't going anywhere." But that was the problem. I didn't want to slow down. For the first time since Kyle had hit me that first night, transforming charming boyfriend into violent controller, I felt alive again. Dante's careful attention, his protection, his obvious desire tempered by remarkable restraint, had awakened parts of myself I'd thought permanently damaged. "I need to understand something," I said, catching his hand before he could retreat completely. "This world you live in, the violence, the gray areas, the power you wield, am I entering that if I choose this? If I choose us?" Dante's expression grew serious. "I won't lie and say my life is safe or conventional. There are risks, enemies, complications that come with being associated with me. But I would never put you in danger deliberately, Iris. You would be protected, shielded from the uglier aspects of what I do. Like your mother was protected?" The question was cruel, but necessary. His face closed off, pain flickering across his features before control reasserted itself. "My mother died because my father underestimated a rival's willingness to break the rules. It taught me, taught all of us, that nothing is more important than protecting family." He squeezed my hand gently. "If you become mine, Iris, you'll have the full weight of the Ravello name protecting you. No one would dare touch you. Because they'd be afraid of you." "Yes." He didn't flinch from the truth. "Fear is a powerful motivator, and I've spent years ensuring that anyone who might threaten what's mine understands the consequences would be severe." The possessiveness in his words should have reminded me of Kyle's controlling behavior, but where Kyle's obsession had felt suffocating, Dante's intensity felt like shelter, a promise of safety rather than a threat of confinement. "I'm not ready yet," I said finally. "To be yours, to be anyone's." I need time to remember how to be just Iris, without someone else's identity wrapped around mine. I understand. And remarkably, he seemed to. Take your time. The penthouse is yours as long as you need it. The contract with Maria is independent of anything between us, and my protection doesn't come with an expiration date or conditions attached. Why? The question I kept asking, still not fully satisfied with his answers. Why do all this for someone you barely know? Dante smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually guarded features. Because the first time I saw you, you were handling roses with the same care most people reserve for children. Because you've survived horrors and still create beauty. Because you called me in the middle of the night, terrified and hurt, and trusted me to help you. His hand came up to cup my cheek. Because I look at you and see someone extraordinary pretending to be ordinary. And I want to see what happens when you stop pretending. Maria Santos's first major event arrived 10 days after I'd signed her contract. A black tie wedding at the Palmer House, one of Chicago's most prestigious venues. I'd spent 72 sleepless hours preparing, transforming Pemberton's Petals into a workshop that would have made my grandmother proud. The 2 temporary assistants Rosa had found proved invaluable, their experienced hands helping me create hundreds of individual arrangements that would transform the historic ballroom. Dante had offered Marco and a second vehicle for transportation, but I'd insisted on using my grandmother's vintage delivery van, a decision I was regretting as Marco and I made our third trip, the November cold seeping through the van's inadequate heating system. Mr. Ravello won't be happy you're working this hard, Marco observed, steady hands managing the van through downtown traffic. You should be resting that rib. It's healed enough, which was mostly true. The sharp pain had dulled to an occasional ache, manageable with ibuprofen and careful movement. And I need to prove I can handle this contract on my own merits, not because Dante arranged special treatment. Marco's knowing glance suggested he understood more than I wanted him to. Over the past 2 weeks, he'd become something like a friend, silent but observant, protective without being oppressive, always present but never intrusive. Miss Pemberton, he said carefully, you know that Mr. Ravello doesn't give special treatment. He makes strategic investments in people and businesses he believes in. The fact that you're also... He paused, choosing words cautiously. That you're also important to him personally, that's separate from his professional assessment of your capabilities. Important to him personally. The words made something warm unfurl in my chest, even as anxiety accompanied it. Dante and I hadn't kissed again since that evening with the roses, both of us maintaining careful distance while the possibility hung between us like a held breath. We still shared dinners most nights, still talked for hours about everything and nothing. But there was a new tension now, an awareness of what we both wanted, but neither would pursue until I was ready. His restraint was remarkable given how I'd sometimes catch him watching me, dark eyes tracking my movements with an intensity that made my skin feel too warm, too tight. The Palmer House ballroom was already buzzing with activity when we arrived with the final load, caterers arranging tables, lighting technicians testing dramatic spots, Maria Santos herself orchestrating everything with military precision. She spotted me immediately, her sharp eyes assessing the garment bag protecting my final creation. Please tell me that's the bridal bouquet, she said, crossing to where Marco and I were unloading. I've been describing it to the bride for a week based on your sketches, and she's been vibrating with anticipation. I smiled, carefully extracting the bouquet from its protective cocoon. I'd spent 6 hours on this single arrangement, combining white peonies with trailing jasmine and subtle touches of dusty miller, creating something that looked effortlessly elegant while requiring extraordinary technical precision. Maria's breath caught. Iris, this is stunning. Even better than your mock-up. She touched one peony petal with reverent fingers. You're going to make me look good tonight, which means I'm going to make you very busy for the rest of the season. That's the plan, I said, allowing myself a moment of pride. Whatever else was uncertain in my life, My ability with flowers remained constant. The next 4 hours vanished in controlled chaos. I supervised the placement of centerpieces, adjusted the ceremony arches' cascading arrangements, ensured every boutonniere was perfect. The ballroom transformed gradually into a garden fantasy, my vision made real through thousands of individual blooms. By 6 o'clock, when Maria finally declared everything ready, I was exhausted but satisfied. The space looked spectacular, romantic without being saccharine, elegant without being stuffy, exactly the balance the bride had requested. "Go home, rest, celebrate," Maria instructed, pressing an envelope into my hands. "First payment, as agreed. You've earned every dollar." She glanced at Marco, who'd remained nearby throughout the setup. "Take care of her. She's worked herself too hard." I was too tired to argue, allowing Marco to guide me back to the van. The envelope remained unopened in my lap during the drive to the Meridian. I knew what it contained, had memorized the payment schedule, but actually holding $10,000 felt surreal. Dante was waiting when we arrived, his expression shifting from concern to relief as I stumbled out of the van on shaky legs. "You should be resting," he said, echoing Marco's earlier sentiment as he steadied me with a hand at my elbow. "I was working," I replied, waving the envelope slightly. "Successfully. The wedding looks amazing. Maria's thrilled, and I just proved I can handle this contract." "I never doubted you could." He guided me toward the elevator, his touch gentle but firm. "But you're pushing yourself too hard, Iris. You're still healing." "I'm fine," I insisted, even as exhaustion made my bones feel like lead. "Just tired. A hot shower and early bed. I'll be perfect tomorrow." The elevator ride passed in comfortable silence, Dante's presence solid beside me. I'd grown accustomed to his proximity, the way he moved through space with unconscious grace, the subtle cologne that always made me think of expensive libraries and older money. Rosa had left dinner warming in the oven, her chicken piccata, my favorite. Dante insisted I eat before showering, his attention so careful and concerned that I found myself complying simply to ease the worry in his eyes. "You're hovering," I observed between bites, watching him watch me from across the kitchen island. "You scared me," he admitted. "Marco said you lifted arrangements that were too heavy, ignored his suggestions to take breaks, worked like you were trying to prove something." "I was trying to prove something," I said, "that I earned this contract through skill, not connections, that I'm capable of handling success without falling apart. Kara, you don't need to prove anything to anyone." The endearment slipped out naturally, and I noticed he didn't try to take it back. "Your work speaks for itself. Maria hired you because you're talented, not because I made introductions." "But you did make introductions," I pointed out. "You created this opportunity, just like you created the safety that lets me take advantage of it. I need to know I can succeed on my own merits." Dante came around the island, stopping close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. His hand lifted, fingers brushing a smudge of pollen I hadn't noticed on my cheek. "You are succeeding on your own merits," he said quietly. The introduction was a door opened. You walked through it and created something spectacular. That's all you, Iris. Your vision, your skill, your determination. The words landed somewhere deep, filling a hollow space I hadn't realized existed. Kyle had spent months convincing me I was worthless without him, that my achievements were only possible because of his support and guidance. Hearing Dante say the opposite, seeing genuine pride in his eyes, felt revolutionary. "Thank you," I whispered, "for believing in me. Always." His thumb traced my cheekbone gently. "You make it easy." The air between us felt suddenly charged, heavy with the possibility we'd been circling. His eyes dropped to my lips, and I saw him consciously choose restraint. Saw the effort it cost him to step back, rather than close the remaining distance. You should shower and rest, he said, his voice rougher than normal. Tomorrow we'll celebrate your success properly. I nodded, suddenly unable to form words, and retreated to my guest suite with legs that felt unsteady for reasons that had nothing to do with exhaustion. The hot shower helped, washing away the day's physical strain, if not the emotional turbulence. I thought about Dante while water cascaded over sore muscles. His careful attention, his genuine support, the way he looked at me like I was something precious and powerful simultaneously. I thought about the possibility we'd discussed, about what might happen if I finally stopped resisting what was building between us. I was toweling my hair dry when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My stomach clenched instinctively. Kyle had been silent for 2 weeks, but I still tensed at unexpected messages. The text was brief, its words sending ice through my veins. Enjoying your new life? We should talk. You can't hide behind him forever. K. My hands trembled as I screenshot the message and forwarded it to Dante. His response came within seconds. Stay in your room. Lock the door. I'm handling this. I did as instructed, my heart hammering against my ribs as I listened to sounds from elsewhere in the penthouse. Dante's voice, low and furious, speaking rapid Italian into his phone. Movement. The elevator opening and closing. Silence. 20 minutes passed before a soft knock came at my door. Iris, it's safe. You can open up. Dante's expression when I cracked the door was controlled fury barely leashed. Kyle's phone has been disconnected. My people are locating him now. He apparently returned to Chicago this morning against explicit warnings to stay away. What will you do when you find him? I asked, not entirely sure I wanted the answer. Ensure he understands consequences more clearly than last time. Dante's voice was deadly calm. He threatened you, Iris. That's not acceptable. I don't want you to hurt him because of me, I said, even as part of me craved exactly that. Craved someone finally making Kyle pay for what he'd done. This isn't about you wanting it, Dante replied. It's about enforcing boundaries. Kyle was warned. He chose to ignore that warning. Now he learns what happens when people ignore warnings from the Ravello family. The casual mention of violence should have frightened me. Instead, I felt only a fierce satisfaction that someone finally was treating Kyle's abuse as the serious crime it was, rather than a private matter to be handled quietly. Will you... I paused, uncertain how to phrase the question. Will you tell me what happens? After? Dante studied me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Do you really want to know the details? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants him to suffer like he made me suffer. Part of me just wants him gone completely, erased from my life like he never existed. Then that's what we'll arrange. Dante's hand came up to cup my cheek gently. Kyle will disappear from Chicago. He'll find it impossible to work here, to live here, to exist anywhere near you, and you'll never have to think about him again. How? I asked. How can you make someone just disappear like that? People who cross me learn that Chicago becomes very small, very uncomfortable. His smile was cold. Jobs evaporate. Leases get mysteriously terminated. Businesses stop doing business with them. Eventually, they realize their only option is to start over somewhere else, somewhere my influence doesn't reach. That's terrifying, I said honestly. Yes, he agreed. It is. But it's also effective. And it doesn't require violence beyond the initial message. His thumb stroked my cheekbone. I told you I'd protect you, Iris. This is what that looks like. I leaned into his touch, craving the comfort and security his presence provided. I'm sorry I'm bringing danger into your life. You're not bringing danger. You're bringing light. He drew me closer, until I was pressed against his chest, his arms wrapping around me with exquisite care. Kyle is a minor problem, easily solved. You, on the other hand. His lips brushed my temple. You're the most complicated, wonderful thing that's happened to me in years. Standing there in his embrace, I felt something shift inside me. The possibility we'd been dancing around crystallized into certainty. I was falling for Dante Ravello, this dangerous, complicated man who handled violence with the same ease he showed gentleness, who offered protection without demanding submission in return. Dante, I said quietly, pulling back enough to see his face. I think I'm ready. Ready for what, Kara? For the possibility to become something real. His eyes darkened with an intensity that made my breath catch. Are you certain? Because once we cross this line, Iris, I won't want to go back. You'll be mine, and I protect what's mine with everything I have. I'm certain, I whispered, and realized it was true. Whatever risks came with choosing Dante, they felt infinitely preferable to the half-life I'd been living before I met him. He kissed me then, not gentle like before, but with unleashed passion that had been restrained too long. His hands tangled in my still damp hair, his body pressed against mine with deliberate intent, his mouth claiming mine with an authority that sent heat spiraling through me. When we finally separated, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. You're sure? He asked one final time. I'm sure, I confirmed. Show me what it means to be yours. Kyle was gone within 48 hours. Not dead, as I'd half feared Dante might arrange, but comprehensively erased from Chicago's landscape. His apartment lease was terminated, his gym membership revoked, his favorite bars suddenly unwelcoming. Every connection that might have anchored him to the city dissolved like morning frost under relentless sun. Dante shared these details over breakfast 3 days after Kyle's threatening text, his tone matter-of-fact as he described the systematic dismantling of a man's entire life. He's currently in Indianapolis, Dante said, scrolling through his phone with casual efficiency. Found work as a warehouse loader, significant step down from his previous position. He won't be bothering you again. I should have felt guilt, or at least discomfort at the ruthless efficiency with which Dante had handled the situation. Instead, I felt only relief so profound it bordered on euphoria. Thank you, I said simply. The past 3 days had transformed our careful friendship into something far more substantial. We'd made love that first night with a passion that surprised both of us, Dante's calculated control dissolving into raw need, my careful self-protection crumbling under his touch. In the morning, I'd woken in his bed rather than the guest suite, his arm wrapped possessively around my waist, his breath warm against my shoulder. Nothing was spoken, but everything changed. Maria's wedding had been spectacularly successful, resulting in 3 immediate bookings from impressed guests. My calendar filled rapidly with consultations, my tiny shop suddenly inadequate for the volume of work I was managing. Dante had offered repeatedly to expand my space, but I'd continued refusing, needing to prove I could manage success independently, until the morning Rosa knocked on my door with concerning news. Miss Pemberton, there's a situation at your shop, she said, her usually composed features tight with worry. Someone broke in last night. The police are there now. The damage was extensive but surgical. Whoever had vandalized Pemberton's petals had known exactly what they were destroying. Expensive flowers trampled and scattered, refrigeration units unplugged, my grandmother's antique vases shattered against walls. But nothing was stolen, which meant this wasn't robbery. It was a message. Kyle? I asked Dante, who'd insisted on accompanying me to assess the damage. No. His expression was grim as he studied the destruction with professional assessment. This is too sophisticated for Kyle's temper. Someone who knows what they're doing sent you a message. What message? My voice cracked slightly as I surveyed the ruins of my grandmother's legacy. What could I have possibly done to deserve this? Dante's jaw tightened. You're with me now. That makes you a target for people who want to hurt me. He pulled out his phone, making a call in rapid Italian before turning back to me. I'm sorry, Cara. I should have anticipated this. Should have provided better security. This isn't your fault, I interrupted, even as fear clawed at my throat. You can't control what other people do. I can control who has access to hurt what's mine. The possessive edge in his voice should have bothered me. Instead, it felt like safety. This shop isn't secure, Iris. Neither is the apartment above it. You need to accept my help now, not as charity, but as necessity. Looking at the destruction surrounding us, I finally surrendered my stubborn independence. What do you suggest? What Dante suggested turned out to be comprehensive transformation. Within a week, Pemberton's Petals had been relocated to a beautiful storefront in River North, still my business, but now operating from a space with proper security, climate-controlled storage, and room to expand. The new location was twice the size of my original shop, with modern equipment and a small office where I could manage the growing administrative demands. The lease is in your name, Dante had insisted when I'd protested the generous terms. I own the building, but you're a legitimate tenant paying market rate. At my skeptical look, he'd amended, reasonable rate, adjusted for your status as my partner. Partner. The word carried multiple meanings now, professional and personal inextricably intertwined. The old shop above which I'd lived was cleaned, repaired, and converted into storage space. Still mine, but no longer my primary workspace or residence. Because I'd officially, permanently moved into Dante's penthouse, the guest suite abandoned in favor of sharing his space, his bed, his life. Rosa had celebrated this development with barely concealed satisfaction. Finally, she'd said, helping me move my remaining belongings. Mr. Ravello has been different since you arrived. Lighter, more himself. Who was he before? I'd asked, curious about the man I was building a life with. Rosa had considered carefully before answering. Responsible, controlled, alone by choice, because trusting people in his world is dangerous. She'd smiled then. But you make him want to risk trust again. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of work and domesticity. Maria's contract kept me constantly busy, each successful event generating new bookings. Pemberton's Petals evolved from struggling sole proprietorship to thriving business, and I hired 2 full-time employees to help manage the growing demand. Dante's support was constant but never controlling. He offered advice when asked, provided resources when needed, but respected my authority over business decisions. He attended some events where my flowers were featured, his presence commanding attention, his obvious pride in my work making something warm bloom in my chest. Our relationship deepened with surprising ease. We discovered compatible rhythms, both early risers, both preferring quiet evenings to social chaos, both finding comfort in routine. I learned his tells, the way his jaw tightened when business calls brought bad news, how he ran fingers through his hair when frustrated, the rare genuine smile that transformed his features. He learned mine, how I hummed while arranging flowers, my tendency to skip meals when focused on work, my habit of reading mystery novels as escape from stress. 3 months after the shop vandalism, an attack we'd eventually traced to a rival family trying to provoke Dante, he took me to dinner at an exclusive Italian restaurant I'd never have accessed on my own. I have something for you, he said over dessert, producing a small velvet box that made my heart stutter. Inside was a key, old-fashioned brass, attached to a simple leather fob. It's to my estate outside the city, Dante explained, watching my reaction carefully. 20 acres, complete privacy, space for gardens you could design yourself. He paused. I'm not asking you to leave the penthouse. I'm offering you roots, Cara. A place that could be ours rather than mine. I turned the key over in my hands, understanding the significance of the offer. This wasn't just a gift of property. It was Dante offering permanence, commitment, a future together beyond the temporary sanctuary where we'd begun. "I love you," I said, the words emerging with startling ease. I should probably be more cautious, more careful about falling for someone whose world includes violence and danger. But I love you anyway. Dante's smile was radiant, transforming his usually guarded features. "I've loved you since you first delivered roses with hands that should have been creating beauty, not hiding bruises. Since you proved that strength and gentleness aren't opposites but companions." He pulled another box from his jacket. Smaller, more traditional. Inside was a ring, a simple emerald surrounded by small diamonds, elegant and understated. "Marry me," he said, not asking but stating desire with characteristic directness. "Let me give you the protection of my name, the security of my resources, the devotion of my heart. Build a future with me, Iris." I thought about the woman I'd been 8 months ago, exhausted, frightened, convinced I deserved the abuse Kyle inflicted. I thought about the woman I was becoming, confident, successful, loved by a man who treated my independence as treasure rather than threat. "Yes," I said, slipping the ring onto my finger where it caught light and scattered it like prisms. "Yes to everything." The wedding was small, private, just Rosa and Marco witnessing as we exchanged vows in Dante's estate garden, surrounded by flowers I'd grown and arranged myself. No family attended because neither of us had much left, but the absence felt appropriate. We were creating our own family now, building something new from the ruins of our pasts. I kept my name professionally. Pemberton's Petals remained my grandmother's legacy. But legally, I became Iris Ravello, protected by a name that carried weight and warning throughout Chicago. Kyle learned of my marriage through whatever grapevine connected Chicago's underworld to Indianapolis's ordinary citizens. He sent a single text that Marco intercepted before it reached me. "Hope he's worth it." Dante's response was elegantly simple. A wire transfer for $10,000, accompanied by a message that if Kyle ever contacted me again, the money would be reclaimed along with considerably more. We never heard from him again. A year after I'd first called Dante's number, Pemberton's Petals had expanded to 3 locations throughout Chicago, each one featuring my designs and employing florists I'd trained personally. The business that had barely survived on wedding bouquets and funeral arrangements now handled events for the city's most prestigious clients. I stood in the original River North location, arranging roses for Dante's weekly order, 36 blood-red blooms that still arrived at our penthouse every Wednesday. The ritual had evolved from mysterious client order to married couple tradition, my way of honoring how we'd begun. Rosa entered carrying her tablet, her efficient organization keeping my increasingly complex schedule manageable. "You have 3 consultations this afternoon, and Maria called about the museum gala. Also, your doctor's appointment is at 4. Did you want me to remind Mr. Ravello?" I touched my stomach lightly, where the smallest curve suggested new life growing. He already knows. He'll meet me there. Dante had been impossibly excited when I told him about the pregnancy 2 weeks ago, his usual control dissolving into genuine joy. He'd immediately started planning renovations to the estate, designing a nursery that would overlook gardens where our child could learn about flowers the way my grandmother had taught me. "You're happy," Rosa observed, her weathered face soft with affection. "It's good to see." "I am happy," I confirmed, surprising myself with how true it was. Not the uncomplicated happiness of fairy tales, but something deeper. The satisfaction of having survived darkness and emerged into light, of having built success from failure, of having found love in the most unexpected place. That evening, Dante and I stood in our estate garden, the place where we'd married, where we planned to raise our child, where my grandmother's roses grew alongside new varieties I was cultivating. The November air carried the scent of earth and fading blooms, autumn giving way to winter's approach. "I never thanked you properly," I said, leaning against his solid warmth, "for seeing me when I was trying to be invisible, for offering sanctuary when I'd convinced myself I deserved punishment." Dante's arms wrapped around me, protective and possessive in equal measure. "You saved yourself, Kara. I just provided the space for you to remember who you were beneath the fear." "We saved each other," I corrected, turning to face him. "You needed someone to remind you that roses could be beautiful again, that vulnerability isn't weakness. I needed someone to show me that strength and gentleness aren't opposites." He kissed me then, tender and deep, a promise of continued devotion wrapped in physical affection. When we returned to the penthouse later that night, 36 blood-red roses waited in their crystal vase, my weekly arrangement perfectly preserved. I touched one petal gently, marveling at how something that had begun as a stranger's mysterious order had transformed into the foundation of everything I now cherished. Dante noticed my contemplative mood. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. "None," I assured him. "Just gratitude for the intersection of chance and choice that brought us together." "Not chance," he corrected, pulling me close. "Fate wearing the disguise of coincidence. You were always meant to be mine, Iris, just as I was always meant to be yours." I nestled against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and believed him.